tonight. So thank you all for joining. My name is Jonathan Waller. So tonight's presentation, we'll call it a workshop presentation, is on TypeScript fundamentals, as it says here, removing the confusion to get started. So my assumption coming into this is going to be for people who are very new to this. So I think before you can get into some really cool stuff with TypeScript, you've got to understand the basics. So that's what this is going to cover. So just giving you guys that heads up in advance. So with that, let's dive in here. So TypeScript, it's a big buzzword, right? It's something that we see everywhere right now. Especially if you guys are, again, my assumption is this is going to be a group of people who are either very new in jobs and they're taking on TypeScript, or they're seeing TypeScript for the first time, or people who are currently in school, whether it be college or a boot camp, learning the code, or maybe you just finished and you're trying to learn some more. So you're probably seeing this keyword TypeScript all over. And any job applications you're looking at, job descriptions, you're seeing it. And, as a new developer, the first thing you think probably is, oh man, this is just more to learn, right? I just learned how to, create apps using whatever language, and now this is something else that I have to adjust to. On top of that, if you look at the TypeScript syntax, it can seem kind of confusing. It's a lot of stuff going on there. It uses some weird characters, so that can be very intimidating to people. It's easy to think, why is TypeScript such a big deal? And is this something that I should even care about? So my goal tonight is to break some of that down a little bit, make it make more sense. I think the description in this said was, I forgot what it said, but something about making it make sense, right? Clearing it up. So I'm assuming that's why you guys are here. I'm glad you guys are here. I'm excited to get into this. So we're going to go over just some simple use cases. Like I said, remove any uncertainty that comes with just getting your toes into this. And honestly, I'd like to be able to walk away from this showing you all that it's actually nice. It's beneficial. So rather than looking at it as a burden, as something that we have to learn because this job wants me to do it, hopefully I can show you that it's actually helpful. So with that in mind, a little bit about me. I currently live in New York City. Moved here a couple of years ago from Dallas, Texas. I've got about 5 years of development experience now. I'm currently a senior front-end engineer. I work for a startup here called Greenwood Labs. We're a tech startup. In this role, we're a very small team. I lead all of our front-end technical development and architecture. And our environment in the front end is React and TypeScript. So I've been pretty heavy into specifically React and TypeScript for the bulk of my first 5 years. As far as school goes, I did go to college. I got a degree in business. But I think what really kind of helped me move my career forward was a boot camp that I attended about 5 years ago. I went to a technical boot camp called Dev Mountain, and I learned more in those 3 months, I feel like, than I did in all of my college. And it's given me a greater purpose and a happier career than I ever had before. So I feel like there's at least a good handful of you all that are in the same boat. So welcome. And if you guys are looking for a job, it is a fun place to be once you get in. On top of that, I am, as Tony mentioned, I am a mentor at Hanawilo. Sorry, Tony, I don't pronounce this very well. So more on that, we can discuss more of that later. But yes, I do work with Tony's community. So I should give you a heads up too. If you see me looking to my left or maybe your right, I've got a different monitor with my presentation on it. So that's what I'm looking at. All right, let's go. Okay, so a quick agenda here, just to let you guys know what we're going to be covering. So get some of the basics down first. What is TypeScript? Try to explain it in a simpler term. Discuss the rise in popularity, like where this has come from and why it's gotten so popular recently. Benefits over JavaScript, to talk about its features, so really how we use it. And then I've got here what I'm calling a workshop, and then finish with a Q&A. So when I talk about this workshop, I thought for a while about how to put this together that would be most beneficial to myself if I was in some of you all's shoes, potentially a new entry-level developer, seeing TypeScript, not understanding it, and wanting someone to make it clear. And with that, I thought, okay, the best way that I would learn is seeing some in action and then trying to wrap my head around it myself. So I went with an approach, as we'll see here as we get to that. Instead of spinning up an application and you guys watching me code, could be fun, could be kind of dull. We're going to do something a little different, and that I'm not going to be doing any live coding. I'm going to show you examples, deep dive into them to really explain them well, and then when we get to this workshop, give you guys a chance to absorb what we discussed, think about it, and then apply it. So hope that works for you guys. Okay, so what is TypeScript? So TypeScript is, I should say too. So I can see this chat. I've got the chat up here. So if anyone has any questions while I'm going, feel free to put something in here, or you can unmute, that's fine, as long as we don't have a gazillion people doing that, but feel free to put a message in here and I will see that and try to respond to that. So what exactly is TypeScript? It is a superset of JavaScript. It's a fancy word. What does that mean? Essentially, it wraps over the top of JavaScript. So if you look at anything that's written in TypeScript, it should look very familiar to you. Because it's JavaScript, it's just got sort of some fancy syntax over the top. So when we use a TypeScript file, when we assign something to be a TypeScript file and it's read as TypeScript, it's adding syntax to allow us to add types. So we'll get into what types are. TypeScript compiles down to JavaScript at its core. So it's just JavaScript. It just gives us, as developers, a little more tools in our tool belt. It's used to make JavaScript more scalable. So we'll discuss that here in a moment. It's got some nice features like IntelliSense. So for those of you that use like a VS Code or another text editor, it'll give you good hints and good errors and warnings about types in TypeScript. So again, we'll get into all that. It's also using a variety of JavaScript. So anything that uses JavaScript can use TypeScript, which is why you probably see it all over because JavaScript's so popular now. So React, Vue, Angular, Node, so front end, back end. So that's why it's used all over. My team, we are our back end uses Node and they use TypeScript too. So our full team uses TypeScript where I currently work. Okay, so let's talk just briefly about the rise in popularity. I dug in a little bit to find some really good stats that I thought would prove my point. It's all kind of boring probably, and it's a bunch of numbers that I didn't want to have to source here. So didn't dig into that necessarily, but I think it's quite obvious that TypeScript is growing rapidly. It is one of the fastest growing programming languages out there. This little graphic here just shows you kind of the number of downloads over just the past couple of years. They've doubled. I forgot some of the stuff I saw, but it is booming. So it's no fluke that we're seeing it all over right now. because it's being used all over. And there's good reasons for that, which we're going to get into. All right, so why would we move from JavaScript in the first place? We're comfortable with that. That's what a lot of us learned on. You can do a lot of cool stuff with it. The reality is JavaScript was not designed as a programming language for large applications. So without going into much of boring history, JavaScript's been around for a while, and it wasn't originally designed to be what it's become. It was a very smart, very, very powerful language. But over the past 10 years, 8 to 10 years, JavaScript has really grown in use and ability. Now we can create full scale front and back, full stack applications using JavaScript alone. So that's awesome, but there are some foundational issues with JavaScript that come with that we'll dig into. Anders Hellsberg, he's considered the father of TypeScript. Solid quote here. He says, you can write large programs in JavaScript, you just can't maintain them. And I think that's very true. So we'll start seeing some examples here. Right off the top here, so JavaScript is very weakly typed. What does typed mean? So look at this example. We're saying let A equals Tony as the string. And then right after that, we can change A to be a number. So there's an issue that you may not really recognize when you're first learning. It's kind of nice that, a let variable lets you change anything to a variable to anything. But there's some real issues that come with that when you look about maintaining code and what some of these variables and functions are supposed to be doing throughout your app. So as a project grows, the weak typing can certainly become a problem. So here's an example. Here's kind of a simple example. So we've got the simple function here, takes in this property, or takes in this argument name. We don't know what name is. So this is pure JavaScript in this example. We have no idea what name is. It could be anything, or it could be nothing at all, right? It could be empty. It could be null. So because we don't know what it is, we've got to put some barriers in there so it doesn't break our code. So in this example, I'm saying, first checking does name exist, make sure it's not empty or null or undefined. If it exists, then do something. Could also say if it's a string, do something. Well, that's kind of a pain, and TypeScript will present us ways to get around that. Okay, here's another example, I think it's a little bit easier to understand and see this one. So we've got a function, takes in this argument of x. Well, we should probably never name an argument something as simple as x, because what the heck is x? But you are going to see that sort of thing in your code. You're going to see, your teammates are going to take shortcuts. They know what it's supposed to do. But if I come in there as a team member, I don't know what x is. What is it doing in this function? So if you just look down, you can see that x is going to use a for each. So for each is an array method. But now I have to, as a team member, I have to go in there and figure that out myself. So that becomes kind of a hassle. It's also lending itself to breaking. So you can see here, if we pass in the number 12, it's going to break because you can't use for each over this number. But there's some real issues with that. Again, this all goes to explain why TypeScript will clean a lot of this up for us. Kind of as I mentioned, it will reduce assumptions in the code. So again, just the exact example that I showed a moment ago. Let's take a look at this using TypeScript. So the syntax may not look familiar yet, but this is the exact same function as before, but instead of just using x in the argument, we're giving it a type. And we'll learn about what this type is in a moment, but essentially what that means is x is a type of, it's going to be an array of numbers. That's what that little syntax means. And it means that in order to call this function, you have to pass in an array of numbers. Well, that's great because we're using a for each there. Now with using TypeScript, the examples that you see at the bottom, if we pass in an array of numbers, we're good. But if we pass in anything else, we're going to get an error. So by passing in a number, we're actually going to get an error in our VS Code. It's already going to break, or our console. It's going to break, and it's going to say, hey, you assigned, this is supposed to be a certain type. In this case, it's supposed to be a type of array of numbers. So passing a type of number is not going to work. So this is really, I think, the biggest beauty. There's a lot of benefits to TypeScript, but if you take anything away from this, or at least what I've experienced so far, it's a real benefit when working with teams. Excuse me. So for those of you, if you're on teams now, I think you'll understand, you get into a code base and you've got, let's say, 10 developers on your team, and you didn't write all the code anymore. And at this point, you go in to look at someone else's function, and you have no idea what it's doing. By adding this in here, this takes away a lot of that ambiguity and makes collaboration a lot better, and it makes our code a lot more secure. Another example that I didn't put in here, but another way to look at this, for those of you that are familiar with like React, for example, and how in React we can pass down profs, so we can pass profs from a parent component to a child. A lot of times we have no idea what the heck these props are actually supposed to be. So a good example would be like passing a prop, having a child component that receives a prop called data. Well, what is data? It could be anything, right? It could be a string, it could be a number, it could be an array, it could be an object. So how do we know what to pass to this thing? So how do we use this function, or how do we use this component, right? React is all about reusable components. But if we're taking in props and we have no idea what they are, it makes it really challenging. So TypeScript takes care of all that. We will console log. Oh yeah, console log. Well, yes. You can console log it once it gets there. If you're debugging something, yes. So if you're debugging something, let's say you got there's a bug and you're trying to figure it out, sure, go ahead and console log data, understand what it is. But if you're trying to use that component for yourself and you're wanting to bring it in and pass, you're wanting to use it in your component. You're wanting to use that as a child. But that component takes data. Well, again, what is data, right? So yes, I agree with you. You can certainly console log. Console log is still my best friend, but it's an extra step. It's kind of messy when TypeScript will lay it out for us in advance. So let's get into some better examples here. So again, we're not going to actually live code anything ourselves, but just so you guys understand how to install it, it's very easy to install TypeScript into any project. For those of you that are familiar with NPM and Yarn, you can either install it globally, or you can just install it into your project. So if you just npm install TypeScript and save that into the project you're on, now you can start using TypeScript. For those of you that use something like Create React App, very simple. You just use the same npx script, and then at the end of that, you just type -- TypeScript. And then that will create a project for you that's already got all of the foundations that you need for TypeScript. I would recommend for anyone that's interested to test some of this out on your own after this, sometime this week, whenever you want. You don't need to go head first into it. So the nice thing about TypeScript is you can mix, now it may not be best practice, but you can mix JavaScript files, and you can mix JavaScript and TypeScript in the same. Seth, I see your question, and I'll answer that here in a moment. You can mix JavaScript and TypeScript together. So you can have it, if your file is a .js file, for example, you don't have, so even if it's a TypeScript project, if you're using a .js file, you can just use .js. Anything that's a TS file, .ts, that's TypeScript. that is what that's what TypeScript is going to read as something that needs its types. So try something and just use maybe one component that is using TypeScript to start. Get your feet wet before it. Because the thing about TypeScript is if you have types if you're not typing things correctly, you'll get a lot of errors. So your screen will be loaded with errors and it's overwhelming. So break it down into small pieces and start figuring out what type it would be. We're going to get into that here. Let's see. Seth asked, would you say the same types? Okay, good questions. Honestly, yeah. Tests, I almost view, so the first question was, would you say that assigning types along with writing unit tests, would that take care of a lot of the issues? Yes, tests will handle a lot. I honestly view TypeScript as almost like another way of writing tests. I personally hate writing tests. I'm very fortunate that where I work, we don't write tests in the front end. The back end we do. But we do use TypeScript, and TypeScript alone kind of keeps us out of the gutter. To where I'm not saying I don't need, I mean, they're different, right? They have different purposes, but yes, combined, they would really, it's only going to enhance it. Second question, do you see more generic props being used in production as opposed to destructuring? Good question. So hopefully I'm answering your question. So if someone just sends a data prop, and let's say it's an object, for example, that's not great because again, we don't know what is in data, right? Maybe it takes 10 properties. A better way would be, instead of passing data, pass individual properties. So let's say data has 3 key value pairs in it that the component's going to need. You're probably better off. So you're asking what I see. What I see in my environments, we'll usually take it out of the data object. We'll pass the individual pieces. But even then, they need to be typed because the individual pieces, we still don't know what those are, right? So I think when you guys start seeing the syntax of TypeScript, it'll hopefully make even more sense here. Okay, here it is. So we talk about how do we set up types, how do we type things. It's as simple as this first example. So let player equals the string Kevin. Well, we're used to that, right? That's normal JavaScript. The only new addition we've added here is this little colon and this word string. So the colon you'll get used to. The colon is how we assign types to properties, to variables in this case. So what this is really saying is player name is of type string. So string is one of the types. We'll go over all the types here in a moment. And what we're doing in this case is we're saying player name, it's a let variable, so we can change it, right? Kevin can become Timmy, can become John, but it's got to be a string. If we try to assign anything that's not a string, we're going to get a TypeScript error. So case in point, Kevin, now we try to assign a 23, number 23 to this, and we see that we've got this TypeScript error here. And it's very deliberate in telling you the error. It says type number is not assignable to type string. Perfect. We know that we're trying to give it a number, and we're trying to assign to something that's supposed to be a string. And that's a simple, I mean, this is a very simple case, but this is simple TypeScript. At its core, this is all it is. Just a little bit more detail, but the same idea. So instead of just a variable, we've got a function here. So in the function, we can also, whatever arguments the function takes, those can and should be typed as well. So this function takes in a name property, so or name argument. So we're telling it right there, this has to be a string. And then from there, we're good. We don't need to guess anymore of does this exist or anything like that. The bottom example shows that if we pass in the string Ellen, we're solid. If we pass in nothing, it's going to give us an error right there in our VS Code that says we expected, this argument is going to be a string and we got nothing. So hopefully this is starting to now make a little more sense and why it's helpful. Again, if you build your own projects, we know what our projects are going to do. We don't need to really think about that, right? So if you look at your own code base, it's like, you probably don't need TypeScript in your own project, right? Maybe it just slows you down because it is some extra work. But as you can think about joining a team or being on a team, you can see how this can be very beneficial. Not only you writing functions that you want your teammates to be able to understand, but you going into a project and will you hide the bubble at the bottom of the share screen? What's the bubble? This thing? Oh, sorry. I didn't know you guys could see that. My bad. So that has been distracting to some of you guys. So sorry about that. Is that better? I hope that if that's good, just if it's not good, let me know. But yes, so this is again, not only is good for you as someone who's writing code and you want to help your other team members, but also to you as someone who joins this code base and you're kind of lost at what these functions are doing. This immediately will tell you, okay, cool, this function takes in a string. Now I understand, rather than diving in. For those of you that have joined teams and working at companies, it's very overwhelming, right? It's very overwhelming to get into this code base the way it is. So although TypeScript looks confusing, it will help you when you just understand the basics of what it's doing. So the syntax is weird, but as you can see, it's very simple. It can get more complex, and we'll look at some complexities, but at the core, this is it. Okay, this is kind of an aside. You don't need to really fully grasp this if it doesn't make sense, but just to let you know. So in some cases, you don't always need to assign a type to a variable if the variable has already been assigned a value. So what that means, this example on the left, let dog name equals Rocky. So we didn't assign a type there, but TypeScript would infer that is a string type because we immediately assign a value to it. So that's identical to the one on the right, which is you could go ahead and assign a string type. There's nothing wrong with that. But TypeScript will let you get by doing it the way on the left because we immediately give it a type in the value, essentially. So looking at this from another angle, so we create this array of animals, and it is an array of strings. And again, we didn't give this a type from the start, but TypeScript will infer this to be an array of strings. So if we try to push something to that array, in this case, we're trying to push a number, it's going to break because this type is inferring that it's an array of strings. Okay, so just a little bit of a way how errors are showed better. So on the left-hand side is pure JavaScript. You can see we're getting something, a number, and we're trying to call trim on that. So trim is a string method. So JavaScript will break, right? It'll tell us we can't do that, but it's kind of a weird description. It's just saying it's not a function. Okay, it doesn't really help me if I'm not familiar with these errors. TypeScript makes it more obvious. We do the same thing in TypeScript. It says trim does not exist on a number because 987 is a number, so that means that A is being established as a number. So again, these other examples do the same thing. TypeScript gives better error messages, I guess I'll say. So, all right, so we're getting close now to where you guys can quit listening to me talk as much, and you guys can start thinking through some of this. So we're going to go through the basic data types, and after that, we're going to get into a workshop. Don't get intimidated by the word workshop. It's nothing is going to be too scary here, but try to grasp what we're doing here, and then we'll kind of go back over it again in this little workshop. So bunch of data types here. These are the primitive data types. So these are all the kind of things that are types essentially. So we've got Booleans, strings, numbers. These are what you'd expect. You know, Boolean being true and false, string is a string, numbers These other ones at the bottom get a little bit more vague. So void, and we'll go into these in more detail, but it's mostly used for function returns, null, undefined, and any. So let's explain these in a little bit more depth. So these are all pretty, I think, obvious when you understand what types are. So the first one being true or false value, that type is Boolean. A string is a type string, and a number is a type number. So those Boolean, string, and number, those are types or keywords. That's what TypeScript reads to understand, okay, cool, this is supposed to be a Boolean. This has to be a Boolean. And again, we're using that colon after the new variable name to apply a type. These here, so void, like I said, it's a little bit kind of a strange word there, but essentially it is used to, it's used in a return. So if you've got a function that's not returning anything outside of the argument little bracket here, you can give it a return type. In this case, since we're just console logging and we're not doing anything else, we can just put void. Null, it's really if you're just assigning a null value. So that's kind of obvious. Undefined, so on this last one here, if we're not assigning any sort of value at all to a variable and we're not giving it a type, then it is inferred as an undefined type. So we'll dig into some of this in a little bit more here. Last one here, the keyword any. So any is a gift and a curse, I guess. Any can be used when it's impossible to determine a type. So you can assign any, and that essentially lets a variable be any type. So as you can see here, this example, we're starting as a number, then switching to a string, switching to a Boolean. And the any will let that happen. It's really not recommended. Honestly, if you think about it, any is really bringing TypeScript back to JavaScript. The whole idea with TypeScript is to be more strict, and then this blows all that up. So not recommended. There are times when you just don't know what type it's going to be, or it really can be anything. In that case, that's fine. But otherwise, I will say, when I started learning TypeScript, and I was pretty lost and it was overwhelming, I use any all over the place. And so you guys starting this out, if you want to try something out and you can't figure out, if you give it an any, it'll pass, so at least you can get the code to work again. But I do recommend trying to stay away from that if possible. Okay, I think that's the last one here, then we'll get into a little back and forth. So there's this kind of or type. It's really for something that allows more than one type. And that's denoted by this vertical pipe here. So this first example, length, means this can be a string or number type. So in this case, as you can see, either of those works. To the right, same thing. We assign a string, we're good. We give it a number, we're good. If we try to give it an array, it's going to break in TypeScript. So that's how you can allow more than one type on a certain variable. Okay, so to what I'm calling a workshop. So what we're going to do here is, so we just went over some things, these types, and I feel like there's only so much that can be comprehended by being talked to, or I guess being presented to in this case. I think the way things work and are absorbed into a kind of muscle memory is by seeing and then doing, trying to think through it yourself. So what we're going to do here, we're going to get into some examples, and then I want you guys just to think a little bit about like how they would be typed. I'm going to show you some options and look through them and see if you can figure out which one of those is correct. So let's try it out. I recommend putting the answer in the chat. I say that, don't take that as pressure. I don't care. It doesn't matter if you're right or wrong. I just want to see if people are starting to kind of pick up what I'm putting down here. So I don't care if it's right or wrong. It's not a speed thing, so there's no rush if you start seeing answers flood in. One, don't look at them answers, please. And two, take your own time, think through it. 'Cause again, that's how this is going to stick. So with that, let's dig in. So here's the first example. So think about how this would be written in TypeScript. Okay, and here are some options. If you see one that looks like it's the correct, drop it in the chat. And again, it's not a speed thing, not a race. It doesn't matter what others are putting in there, right? It's more, I think, at least, like, if you guys are looking to understand this, it's best just to look at this and try to ignore those answers and see if one makes sense. Okay, this was a simpler one. Obviously, it's a string. The main thing here is remembering what the syntax is. Yes. Okay. Yes, so that the syntax, right? It's colon is a key, right? Simple enough. Not trying to oversimplify it, but that's the thing to remember is that colon. All right, let's get into another one. Here's another one. And here we go. The complexity will rev up just a bit, but we're starting a little simple. Okay, I'm seeing some different answers here now. Keith, you got to stick with it, man. What if that one was right? Okay, so let's see. And drum roll, please. The answer on this one is C. But I'm glad I saw an answer or two there that was A. So this is interesting, right? So if you look at what A is, we're casting that as a string. So false, although it's a word, right? It's actually a Boolean value. Boolean value would be true or false, like a keyword almost. So in this sense, it would actually be a Boolean rather than a string. Now, if we wrap some quotations around false, then that would be a string. Okay, a little different here. Which one of these here is incorrect? Which one looks incorrect? I should have like a little timer on here so we know how much time we got on the clock. I see my timer. I got 20 minutes, so I got to move. Okay. Okay, this answer is D. So it is, okay, so the incorrect one is that last one there. Although 35 is a number, this is wrapped in quotations. So in this regard, it is actually a string. So I think we got that one there. Okay, here's another I want to take a look at here. So look at how this is set up and then think about how that would be typed. And again, I think just the repetition is where things set in. So as you see more and more and you start to absorb it more and more, I think is where it makes more sense. Okay, so let's see here. Okay, Okay, so yeah, this one's D. It's obvious. It's going to be. It's allowing either a number or a string. So out of the possible answers, that last one is it. Okay, I think this is the last one before we move to another group here. Take a look at this one. And there are some answers. All right, got a little differing opinions on this here. I like that. Okay, so the answer is B. So the reason I've got any here, so some of y'all put number or string. That works for all of them besides the last one. And I guess that's kind of not fair because I haven't taught, we haven't explained yet how to type an object. So that's a bit unfair. I just now realized, but it's a trick question, I guess. But yes, everything else is spot on, right? Everything else is a string or number, but that last one is an object. So let's dig into arrays and objects. This is where it gets a little more complex, but this is what you're going to see in your code all the time. This is all data, it seems like, is packaged in arrays and objects. So we can type arrays using these square brackets here. And the syntax of this is kind of strange, I guess. It took me a while to understand. So the syntax, as you can see, const cities, same thing, colon, but then a syntax for typing an array is this empty array bracket with whatever goes inside that array, the types that are inside that array, that type keyword is to the left of the bracket. So kind of odd, but if you look at these, you'll see the pattern, right? So the first one, it's an array of strings. So we've got that empty array on the right, and then the keyword string. So when I look at this, a lot of times I immediately, if I see that empty bracket, I know it. So I almost look right to left in this case. You see that is going to be an array, and then anything to the left of that will tell you what's going to go inside of it. There is another option. You can use this generic keyword array. It works too. I don't see it used as often. I don't use it, but that would be another option. The final one down there, if you want to allow more than one type into an array, let's say in this example, we've got a number and a string. Same thing, square brackets to the left. We've got that or pipe. And then we wrap those in parentheses. So that's a little more complex, but the same standards apply. We're just adding a little bit more, I guess, spice on top of that there. Okay, so let's see if we can remember that. I don't mean to go too fast, but I feel like we've only got so much more time, so I want to get through this. So we've got this array here. Take a look at that. Think about how that would be typed. And here's some options. Okay, so we've got some answers in the chat. And yes, this answer is A. So just as we talked about, right, we've got the syntax. You guys are probably getting a little more familiar with the syntax now. They're all set up very similarly. This is going to be an array of strings. So I didn't trick anybody on that one. Okay, take a look at that one. So think about, before even thinking of the syntax, think of what type this would be. All right, and then take a look at these options. I was going to have Tony keep track of the winner here and have a prize at the end, but didn't have a very good prize, and that would be a lot of work for Tony to keep up.
I think everyone won in this case.
Oh, I'm sorry, it would have to be the first winner, but then that turns into a race, and I didn't want a race.
Oh yeah, I didn't.
And then yes, otherwise I'm giving a lot of gifts. Okay, so this is an answer C. It looks like I didn't see everything that came up, but it looks like most people got that. So yes, this is going to be an array of a mixed type, right? You're going to have type string or number. So move on. Okay, the last type that I want to talk about here is objects. So again, it looks a little bit more crazy, but it's the same concept. It's the same concept that we've done. We're just expanding this now. So the syntax for an object, so if we take a look at location, don't mind the syntax, the type first. Look at what's in location. You've got these three keys: city, state, zip codes. City is a string, state is a string, zip codes is an array of numbers. Okay, now let's take a look at how it's being typed. So location, colon, again, that's how we type everything. Now, unlike arrays, objects are a little bit more, I think, they make a little more sense to me how they're set up. You wrap it in an object, the curly brackets, denoting that it's an object. Oh yeah, Kahoot is good. I thought about Kahoot actually. So we denote this in the outer brackets, the curly brackets. Everything inside is what keys, and then the values of those keys. So look through that. City is one of the keys, and we're saying it's a string, right? Because city, Brooklyn, that's a string. State is a string. Zip codes is an array of numbers. So that one's pretty straightforward. The other one is if we don't know the exact set of keys. So let's say we've got an object that may take all sorts of different keys. In that regard, we'd have to do something a little different, because let's say we don't know that it's going to be city, boroughs, and population. If we don't know the exact keys, we set it up like this. This looks more confusing, but essentially it's the same thing. You've got the outer curly brackets. Inside, right after the curly bracket, we've got this this bracket around key, and we're calling that a string. What that means is every key in the object, so city, boroughs, and population, those are all keys. Those are strings, right? City, borough, population, those strings. Then outside of that colon, we're saying what types will be for the different values. So we're saying here that all of the keys are strings, and the values will be either a string or a number. New York City is a string, 5 is a number, 8.5 million is a string. So that one was confusing to me. It took me a while to kind of understand that. It's kind of a thick one to look at. Let's see if we can put it to the test here. So here is an object, and here's our examples. Okay, and the answer is A. So yes, it's an outer brackets. Name is going to be a string, and age is a number. So in this case, we're doing the hard-coded. Go back. Oh, do you want to see one? Oh. Vera, did you want to see something on here? Oh, I think Tony's going to share this too, so that might help. I want to make sure that okay. Okay, you're welcome. There you go. So yes, this type, just matching up the keys in the object, which is name and age, and then what is the type of the value. So Jim is a string, 25 is a number. Okay, here's another one. So hopefully you guys are seeing, like, it just extends on the basic data types. And then as you get something that's bigger and kind of uglier, like this is a big, ugly object with all this different stuff in it, you can handle it, right? It's just, you just take it one step at a time and you type them out. Okay, got some answers into the chat. That's right. So again, it's an object. It's got the three properties. Friends, the last one, is an array of strings. So it seems like we're starting to get the hang of this here. Here's one other one, just kind of keep in mind. So this is going to be an object that's got these properties in it. And right after that, we're actually adding another property called climate to the mix here. So think about what this would be. Damn, I thought I'd trip some people up, but you guys got this one figured out. Yeah, so it has to be that middle one. If we did the first one, it would break because we're forgetting climate, and then when climate got added, it would break. If we did the last one, it would break when we first established the object because we're missing the climate. So you guys got that one. Now you can see where this little syntax comes into play. Oh, I didn't answer. I didn't show it, but you guys already gave the answer there. So, okay, let's get past this one just because I want to make sure I'm up against the clock here. So functions, we talked about, we can use functions. We can use types and functions as well. So this first one's not using TypeScript at all. That's bad. Second one, we're using types in the arguments, which we showed earlier. That's better. That's good. I think that's a bare minimum. You want to go even better. You not only type the arguments, but if you can see out here on the outside, what we're saying here is this is a return type. So in this function, we are returning a string. So this function returns this string of last name and first name. So up here, outside of the argument, we're saying this function is going to return this string. So that's the best way. That's a fully typed function if you can get that knocked out. Let me fly around here a little bit here because I wanted to save some time for any questions that anybody might have. I went over this in my head, not in my head, out loud earlier today, and I came under the time, but I guess I've gotten a little long-winded during the live demo. So I want to talk a little bit briefly about interfaces. This is a little bit more advanced, so not something that you guys have to really fully grasp. The idea behind it, don't worry about this word contract, it's just a technical term. The idea is what you can do is use this for reusability. So we can establish a type essentially, or it's called an interface. And this interface is going to say, okay, whatever we're calling this player, it's going to take these properties, these key value pairs. So it's going to take these keys and then these types. So it's going to take a name, it's a string, position, it's a string. And then you can create a variable called, say, new player. And instead of writing out all that type stuff again, you just give it player. And it's very good for reusability because otherwise you see all of this code. There's a lot of code written to write these long types, as we saw tonight. This cleans it all up. You have it in one spot. Let's say you put this in like a global type, for example. You bring this in. You import player into your components, and then you use it, and it keeps everything kind of tidy, and it means less work for you. This other idea of extends, basically it takes everything from player. So this here, player with attributes, is going to take everything from player and add other things on top of it. So player with attributes is going to have everything from player, name, position, age, and also attributes. So you can kind of keep building off of that. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, same concept here. This is just a good example of you writing it out by hand, which is long and hard, right? But if you create an interface, you could just use that interface. The real beauty is reusing it. So instead of writing all of this out here for both of these, now it's reusability to its finest. So that's that. Same idea here. This is just for functions. Okay. We covered a decent amount here, but this is just the tip of the iceberg with TypeScript. But honestly, if you understand the basics that we covered, everything else makes sense. It all extends beyond what we just covered. You got to understand that part, and then you can get into assertions. aliases. I didn't even touch on classes, which is a whole other aspect of it. Modules. There's a lot to learn. Maybe another workshop, maybe another time. But you can only cover so much in this. So I think we nailed the basics here. I hope this helps. If anyone is working on anything that, let's say you're trying out TypeScript and it's, you got questions or something like that. Tony mentioned this in the beginning. So for those of you that aren't familiar with Hanawilo, it's a community Tony's put together. It's a great group of people in there right now, people supporting one another. It's people that are getting into the industry. It's nice. I wish it's something that I had available to me when I came out of my boot camp, because I was lost after boot camp, right? And I was scared, like a lot of people were probably. So this is a place to kind of land into, get a community that you have access to. We got a whole squad here, right? So this should see like there's a whole bunch of people that are available. They've all got different skill sets. You got a question here. Okay, so that's it. If anyone's got questions, I do see one here from Seth. Is the extends similar in concepts to class? Sorry, I lost that. Classes and object, yes, and object-oriented programming. Yes, it is. That's it. We didn't even get to classes and any of that, just because there's so much to cover. I am a front-end React developer, so this is like I covered more on what I cover on a typical day. But you get my back-end brothers in here, and they would be doing, my team. The two people on my team that are using TypeScript in the backend, they'd be all classes all day. So yes, to answer your question, it's very similar. So it's actually really cool. There's a ton you can do in TypeScript. I hope that this tickled a little bit of an itch, or at least gave you enough confidence that you guys can dive in and start doing it yourself. Do we have any questions? You can chat, or I can shut up and you guys can ask whatever questions you've got.
Yeah, and thanks again, John, for presenting. And so if you guys have questions, feel free to not even just raise your hand, and John will be able to answer questions there. So go ahead and start raising your hand if you have any questions.
I either stunned everybody or I answered everything.
Yeah, that was great. That's
I know TypeScript isn't exactly exciting. It's dull as hell, which is why I think of a way that could maybe be informative without being dry. Because man, it's dry, right? But we all use it now, so
yeah. And if you guys are coming from Java, this should look very, very familiar to you, just dealing with TypeScript. But it looks like Scott, you had a question.
Yes, you mentioned that it's a superset of JavaScript and it all gets compiled into JavaScript. So how do you compile a TypeScript file?
Well, Tony, you may have a little more answer on this than what I do. You're using TypeScript all around too, so I've gotten a little bit lucky in that I get the beauty of React that does a lot of this for me. Tony, do you have any insight into that?
Yeah, so, Scott, what was your question again?
How do you compile a TypeScript file? If you're just writing a plain old TypeScript file, like you would run a JavaScript file with Node, how would you compile a TypeScript so you could run it?
Yeah. So one thing to know is that all JavaScript that you write is valid TypeScript. So just letting you know. So that's one thing about TypeScript. Next thing is that when it comes to compilation, all TypeScript gets just dreaded down to being still JavaScript with typed checking. And so one thing that's nice about TypeScript that John said is that it will fail to compile if your code has type errors in it. So you can't even run, let's say if you run a Node.js application, you're not going to be able to run that because when it compiles to JavaScript, it's going to prevent you from running it because of a type error. And so that's nice, but also it's very annoying sometimes. But One thing you have to realize about JavaScript is that, as John said, it's not very safe. But what the beauty of the TypeScript is it actually gets rid of a lot of the errors that you see in JavaScript. Majority of the errors, and John, you can definitely speak more on this too, but majority of the errors that you guys are going to see in production is because of why? Because of data type errors. And majority of that's covered with TypeScript. And so that's why people are trending towards using TypeScript. And so for your question, TypeScript compiles down to JavaScript at the very end of the compilation. And so when you run your Node.js app, regardless if it's on the front end or back end, it still compiles down to JavaScript. And so unlike JavaScript, where even if you have type errors, it'll run, it doesn't care. But in TypeScript, it'll stop you from compiling because of the type error. And so that's kind of nice. And so, like John said, it kind of allows you to write less tests. If you have good code, intention of code, there's no need to have test. And so testing is a very great area. And so TypeScript kind of helps reduce that and write more code and more business logic and with the reduction in tests. And so hopefully that answers your question on that one. What else? Anything else? Oh, Bryce, you had a question there?
Maybe it was an unintentional hand raise.
Oh, did you just raise your hand, Bryce, or you had your hand raised there, Bryce? Oh, did you meant to ask a question, or?
Put it in the chat if your mic's not working.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Cool. While he types it, anybody else have any questions? Again, so Vera asked about when's love the workshop. Appreciate that. So as you guys know, I founded this company about 8 months ago, and we've been very successful just mentoring students on a technical level and bringing them up, like what Jonathan says. And so I've been doing this is a second run workshop with Jonathan along with another mentor. But the next workshop coming up is on April 13th, and so that'll be on crafting the technical interview. And so that'll be doing by two twin brothers, Micah and Colin Mosley. They currently work at FANG companies. So one works at Google, one works at Bloomberg. One of them actually never got a job rejection. And so they're going to be teaching you how to craft the coding interviews from their mindset. And so if you guys are interested, and so I'm going to paste this again. Feel free to connect with Jonathan and I. And so I'm going to paste it here. And then also, if you guys are wanting to get technical mentorship, that includes resume reviews, also lessons on any of the concepts that we covered from a professional mentor like myself or Jonathan, take a look at that list. And if you have a upcoming interview coming up, what's a better way to prepare and get your confidence up with a mock interview with a professional that currently works in the industry? And so if you guys are currently needing additional guidance and additional mentorship of where you need to go to set your direction, it's an investment. So definitely take a look at our website. So I'm going to paste that here again. So again, a lot of the students that went through the program have felt an elevation of confidence, but also knowing what the direction they need to take. And so John and I, you can talk to any of us and see how we can help you. We'll create a roadmap and get you all squared up. And so definitely, if you want to just join the Slack community, register for an account on our website on hanawilo.com. That way I can send you a Slack invite. Also, if you want to get the recording, please register, because I'm going to be sending the recording through an email list from the website alone. So if you found it very, very helpful, go ahead and register there. And so, yeah, and it looks like, definitely the people that have been in this community already get the benefits of it. So if you have the capacity to work with a mentor, that is definitely a great asset to you. And so if you find that helpful, definitely take a look into that. And so John is focused on TypeScript and front end. And so if you're going to go for a front end job, which mostly pretty much all practically bootcamp students will, but if you're into the back end, we have someone from Java, Node.js like myself, and expertise in Python. And so definitely take a look at that mentors list. And so that being said, Bryce, or actually, yeah, did you type your question out there?
Yeah, Seth has. I think that Seth's question is for you, Tony, and then I'll handle Bryce. He had asked about what you were talking about, tests and maybe taking the place of. He's asking, does that include integration and E2E tests?
You said that you want to take the question for Steph. Is that you said you want to take that?
I think that was related to what you were talking about.
Oh, yeah.
It's been kind of a minute
Steph,
now.
are you elaborate more on that? What do you mean by does that include integration and E2F tests? Like, oh, like when I say tests in general? Oh, I think I know what you mean by that.
Yeah, no, it was just regarding the conversation you were talking about using TypeScript and that preventing the need to write unit tests.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So when I talk about tests, I'm talking generally about unit tests that talks about like
Okay.
the functionality of each modular amounts of code. When it comes to integration and end-to-end tests, now you're talking about system to system to like now you're testing against API testing. I think that in itself is more extensive on like that's required regardless of like the language you use. Even in Java, when I write code, you're gonna have to write integration to end-to-end tests because that's testing the compatibility with like different servers, right? And so that's still required. But I'm talking more specifically like unit code. Bryce asked, do you guys think there is a use case for using regular JavaScript, or is it always a good idea to use TypeScript once you learned it? Great question. Jonathan, I'll also get your opinion on this, but in my opinion, if you are already kind of in this mindset of getting a job, trying to prepare for a job, use already what you know. So if you're trying to prepare for a technical interview, think about your timeline. You want to sell yourself in the most competent way as possible, right? And so if you're already set on knowing about JavaScript, then just deliver on that and deliver a project on that. Use TypeScript as like a progression of another language that you learn. Maybe once you get a job or once you want to look for just jobs focused on TypeScript. Once you know JavaScript, bridging over TypeScript isn't as bad as you think. It's definitely more verbose, but allows you to get a better understanding and appreciate like preventing errors. And so, as Jonathan says, TypeScript is a very popular programming language for the fact that it reduces majority of the bugs that you see today, which is because of type errors. And as a fact, that's very, very true. That's majority of like the production code anyways, because of type misjudgments on that. And so, but yeah, that'll depend on where your timeline is. So if you're in the interview process, definitely still focus on JavaScript, but realize you can still do interviews in TypeScript because what did I say? All JavaScript is valid TypeScript. The only thing different is that you're adding now type checks. So if you come from Java, there shouldn't be anything new to you. If you come from Java, it should be a lot easier just because you already do your strong typed language anyways. And so if you're just coming purely from JavaScript, then all you have to know is that you're just adding on a pending of the types of data that you're dealing with. That's really it. And so I don't know if there's anything else, Jonathan, you want to add on that one?
Yeah, I think you nailed it. I think what you're saying is spot on, and that like, you gotta. I don't know where everyone stands in terms of if you're just out of a school or if you're working already. You want to solidify where you stand before taking a bite of something new. So if you're just now really getting familiar with JavaScript, get good at that first, and then dive into TypeScript. Like I mentioned earlier, like maybe create a project and one file has TypeScript at first. Most of these positions, you're going to see all of these that say TypeScript, and their requirements are nice to haves. For the most part, if you're an entry-level junior developer, you're not going to be expected to be a killer in TypeScript yet, but they are going to want you to know your way around JavaScript. TypeScript can be picked up. So yes, if you're really feeling good in JavaScript and you want to just get better, yeah, take it on. Take it on as a nice little challenge. It's not that hard to pick up. But if you're still wiggling your way around, trying to find your way in JavaScript, maybe just stay there, get confident there, and then you'll get TypeScript later on.
Yeah, absolutely. Sell on your confidence rather than your quantity. It's quality versus quantity that you're dealing with here. And John and I both interviewed many just candidates, entry level especially. One thing we ask, the biggest gap we see is the fundamentals. Make sure you get your fundamentals straight. If you can't get the fundamentals right, it's gonna be tough to learn another language. So learn how to ride a bike with training wheels on first before you actually ride it without it. That's really the exact same thing. And so really establish your understanding of the fundamentals. And if you need additional help, we're here to help you out as well. So if you need that additional guidance, we're here to help with that. So learn to establish your fundamentals first, regardless of what language it is. Get really good at that, and then to expand upon another language. No need to have 3 or 4 languages in your belt. If you can sell yourself on just one, that's what you need. Just like any time you go to a doctor, you want to go to a doctor that's a dentist and a doctor, right? You would go to one that's specialized. Just like that, you want to market yourself like that. So get good at the fundamentals. That's what it takes to be successful in the job market, especially now. You guys have more time than anyone else in this market. With this market being more difficult, you have more time to invest in what? Your skill sets. And so invest in that first before you start being too extreme on learning up all these different languages and technologies. We don't need that. You can just focus on a couple set that you're very comfortable and competent in, and that's what's going to take you to success to your